proceeding to wrap his arms around his neck, the knife now pressed on his throat, creating a small wound that is bleeding out. The Airbnb Jimmy rented online looked exactly like the pictures. Having traveled all over Japan, his wife, Darlene, and 7-year-old daughter, Kaylee, were on their last leg of their spring break getaway, and back home to Dallas they go. This morning, they wound up in a nice home in the small town near some beautiful hot springs. The house looked really old, but well maintained. Snow covered its once moss-colored roof. Its wooden textures made Jimmy glad that they booked this particular house, as he was looking for an authentic local experience. They were the lucky first Airbnb tenants to find this place, and so the price was a steal. They were in for a relaxing 4 days and 3 nights in this area. They dropped their stuff, Mom and Dad in one room, and Kaylee on her own. Then, they left for the town center. They had a long, busy day of touring the town center, the hot springs, and the other sites of interest. They arrived at around 8 in the evening. It was very cold, and Dad struggled to put the key into the keyhole, his hands slightly frostbitten. Kaylee was standing behind them, was staring at the second-floor window, looking distraught. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the window. Jimmy asked her what she was referring to. She replied that there was a shadow on the window. Then, it just disappeared. Dad dismissed it, saying she must be imagining it again, as she used to have an imaginary friend. Finally, Jimmy is able to open the house, and into their rooms they go. Kaylee asked if she could sleep in their room that night, but the husband and wife refused. Kaylee was so scared, she kept the lights on and slept soundly. Then, in the middle of the night, she awoke to the sound of heavy, strained breathing. She opened her eyes and realized that the lights were now off. This frightened her, as she was absolutely sure she kept them on. Then, she heard the voice say something loudly in Japanese. "Anata hadare," said the voice. She looks around the room, and there, in the doorway, there is a figure, a woman in dirty, white clothes. "Mom?" she called. "Anata hadare!" she shouted. Then, she walked forward. In the darkness, she can barely see the outline of a disheveled old woman. Kaylee closed her eyes and screamed. Her parents rushed out of their rooms, turned on the lights in the corridor, and the woman was gone. Kaylee pointed to the door while screaming. Dad looked around, while Mom rushed to comfort her. There was no one there. Dad was standing in the spot where the woman stood. He told his daughter it might have been just a nightmare. He tells her that she can sleep in the same room as them that night. Then, he stops in his tracks, looks down, and sees that there seems to be a puddle of water where he stood, about the size of footprints. They finally managed to get some sleep for the rest of the night. Darlene was taking a shower. She was delighted that such traditional old house had hot running water. While she was busy putting on shampoo, she suddenly screamed in pain as she felt it. A rough, sudden pain on her left wrist. There were deep scratch marks. There was very little blood, but it was red and painful. She looked around at the shower, and there was no one there. But on the glass, there was an outline of a hand on the steam. This scared her. She started airing her concern to her husband. She's starting to believe that there is something really wrong with the house. Jimmy can no longer dismiss their concerns. He sat down with his wife and daughter, and together, they started looking for other Airbnbs, but everything was fully booked. He managed to find a small hostel that looked tiny, but it was better than this place. However, they could only move there at noontime the next day, so they had to sleep in the house for the night, as it was freezing outside. While Jimmy didn't fully buy their stories, he was respectful of what the two ladies experienced, so they all moved their stuff from the upstairs room, where the bathroom is located and where Kaylee saw the woman. They huddled together on the floor downstairs, near the staircase. This was not what they had hoped for their vacation. They managed to finally fall asleep. But then, they all hear it. A loud groan from upstairs. A sound like whimpering. It was echoing all over the house. Jimmy opened his eyes and pulsed down his blanket. The sound stopped. He is now staring at the ceiling, waiting, listening for the sound. For a short while, there was nothing. Then, the wailing, the sound of a woman howling, crying. He thought he was in a nightmare, but he stood up. Then, a hand suddenly grabbed him. It was Kaylee. "Daddy, no, I hear her too." Jimmy was not sure if it was a ghost or an intruder, so he grabbed an umbrella and got ready for a fight. He walked slowly towards the stairs, Kaylee looking on worried. He turned to the corner and saw two dirty feet, some liquid in between them, falling from inside the skirt of a decomposed old lady. Is she peeing? She stared at him intently, and in the blink of an eye, she was in front of him, crying, bloody, decomposing, and angry. He tried to scream in terror, but no words came out of his mouth, and he fell, collapsing on the floor, hitting his head on his way down. He wakes up to paramedics taking his vitals inside the home. They tell him he collapsed in the middle of the night, but Kaylee and Jimmy knew what really happened. The owner of the Airbnb on the phone, speaking to his wife. His wife, crying. Jimmy asked what was going on, and the real story emerged, equally sad and horrifying. The house was the ancestral home of the young owner. His mother and father lived there for decades. He was raised there. As his old mother started suffering from dementia, it became too much for him, and he left her in that house, with only a nurse to take care of her. The nurse got fed up as well and abandoned the old lady. She died alone, scared and in despair, angry that she had been forgotten. Her body was found 2 months after she died. No one bothered to check on her. The son just cleaned the home and put it up for rental afterwards. He profusely apologized for their experience and just offered a refund instead. The house was too good to be true. A cheap beachside property overlooking the Mediterranean Sea for Alan and Sasha's 3rd anniversary. To think they almost didn't continue with the booking, as Sasha found the owner of the property creepy when they spoke via Zoom. Plus, the location has never been rented. The price and quality of the pictures and videos convinced them to go on. Though they were never married, they always celebrated the first date. As they opened the door to their Airbnb rental, Alan steps forward and trips on the tiny elevated part of the doorstep. The night was uneventful at first. They had dinner by candlelight and wine, followed by some average-priced wine. They were happily munching on the cheese platter when they are startled by a loud knock on the door. It was really more of a thud than a knock. They looked through the keyhole. At first they couldn't really see anything. Then, an eye was staring back at Alan. The woman took a step back. She looked like in her late teens. Alan noticed that she had some bloody bruises on her face. She begs them to let her in. She tells them she ran away from her boyfriend, who was hurting her, and would like their help to call the police. Sasha was suspicious, but Alan saw the woman crying. She looked genuinely in distress, and so, after a little back and forth, decided to open it. As he is turning the handle, still staring outside, he noticed a man hiding in the bushes behind her. Nope, he thought to himself, and he told her to go away, or he will call the cops. The man from the bushes emerged, brandishing a knife, and started moving towards the door. Sasha rushed to the kitchen to get her pepper spray, her hand dialing the police on their phone. Alan grabs the hat rack. Alan tells her that if they break down the door, they will have to fight. They stand there in anticipation. They were waiting for the inevitable thud of the door being broken down. Instead, they heard the lock click. How? How were they able to open the door? The man lunged at Alan as he hit the robber squarely on the face, blood gushing out of the guy's head, and he became even angrier. While on the floor, the man manages to stash Alan in the foot, creating a long gash that starts bleeding out. Alan instinctively falls to his knees in agony. Sasha runs forward to help him, but the man, proceeding to wrap his arms around his neck, the knife now pressed on his throat, creating a small wound that is bleeding out. Sasha stops in her tracks. Behind them, the wretched woman is looking outside on the road, making sure that no cars or neighbors are around. Blood is now gushing down Alan's neck. Though the wound is not deep, he could feel the intense burning sensation of the blade ripping through the flesh of his neck. Sasha saw that they were now at the doorstep, and he is dragging Alan out, slowly. The man instructs her to give him everything they have. She says okay, she will just get her purse. They can take whatever they want. Sasha notices that the man's foot is on the precipice of the elevated part of the doorstep. She starts taking off her earrings, the ring Alan gave her, and her wallet. The man tells her to give it to him. She walks forward, but instead of handing it to him, she throws them. The man tries to catch them with his other hand, stepping backwards into the same doorstep elevation that tripped Alan and he falls. The blade creates a long slash wound on Alan's neck. Not deep, but still very bloody. As he lost his balance, Alan elbows him hard on the chest, causing him to fall. Alan turns around, and with all his energy, gives this monster's face the strongest kick he can give. Two of his teeth fall down on the floor, and he is rendered unconscious. The woman turns around and screams, runs towards the house angrily, but before she could do anything, her eyes and nose get a healthy serving of pepper spray, and they manage to subdue her with ease. The man never fully recovered. He spent the next 3 weeks unconscious and woke up to permanent nerve damage in the brain after his skull fractured. The woman is now serving a 2-decade-long sentence, and a third suspect, the Airbnb owner, who allegedly gave them the key and orchestrated this rental for the robbery scheme's case, which is still ongoing and its details are undisclosed. Alan recovered with several stitches on his neck, and they are expecting twins. They have stopped using rental services and opt to have staycations instead.